My roommate's girlfriend has been living here for 3 months rent-free, and now they're saying I'm the one who needs to leave. I've been living with Brock for over a year, splitting everything 50-50. It was fine until his girlfriend Sienna started staying over 3 months ago. She never left. She's here every single night now. Our utility bills shot up 40%. The electric bill went from $80 to $140. More cooking, longer showers, AC constantly running because Sienna works from home. But I'm still splitting everything 50-50 with Brock while essentially supporting 3 people. I feel like a guest in my own apartment. I've hinted before, but Brock brushes me off. I'm at my breaking point. I can barely afford rent as is. I finally decided to have a serious conversation. I pulled together our utility bills, highlighting the increases. I was going to talk to him. I waited until Sienna went to yoga class, and I sat Brock down at the kitchen table and laid everything out. Look, I need to talk about Sienna living here. She's been here every single day for 3 months. Our bills have gone up significantly, and I'm paying for a third person. Brock actually looked guilty. You're right. I didn't realize it was affecting you this much. That's not fair to you, man. She needs to either start paying a third of everything, or she needs to stay at her own place more often, I said, keeping my voice calm. Brock nodded slowly. Yeah, I get it. Let me talk to her this weekend. We'll figure something out. Maybe she can contribute, or maybe she needs to be at her place more. I appreciate you being cool about this. Over the next few days, I noticed Sienna wasn't around as much. She came by maybe 2 or 3 nights instead of every night. I felt this huge wave of relief washing over me. Like finally this nightmare was getting resolved. Brock even texted me midweek. Had a good conversation with Sienna. We're working on a solution. Thanks for being patient with us. Really appreciate it. He Venmo'd me his half of the utilities on time that month. He even added an extra $20 without me asking, like a peace offering. I stared at my phone thinking, thank God. We handled this like adults. For about a week, everything felt normal again. But that didn't last long. Last Thursday, I came home from work around 6 in the evening. When I walked through the door, Brock and Sienna were sitting at the kitchen table looking serious. But there was a third person with them. A man in a full business suit, briefcase open, documents spread across the table. I gulped before anyone even said a word. Brock's face was completely cold and expressionless. Not the friendly roommate I'd had that conversation with last week. This is our attorney, Harrison, Brock said flatly, his voice like ice. Sienna sat there with her arms crossed, not even looking at me. I'm sorry, what? I felt like I couldn't breathe properly. Attorney? What's going on? I thought we worked this out? Harrison adjusted his glasses and spoke in this formal, completely detached tone. I'll get straight to the point. Sienna has been residing at this address for over 60 days, which establishes legal tenancy in this state. She has full tenant rights under state law. But she doesn't pay rent. I could hear my voice getting higher and more desperate. She's not even on the lease. Payment isn't required for tenancy establishment, Harrison continued calmly, like he was reading from a script he'd memorized. Duration of stay is what matters legally. Once someone has lived somewhere continuously for 60 days, they're considered a legal tenant with all associated rights. Harrison slid a stack of papers across the table toward me. I saw my own text messages printed out, highlighted in bright yellow. The conversation where I told Brock that Sienna needed to pay or leave. Other texts where I'd complained about her being there constantly. We have documentation of your repeated harassment of our client, Harrison said coldly, demanding she leave the premises, confrontational conversations, creating a hostile living environment for a legal tenant. Harassment? My hands were shaking badly now. I was just asking for things to be fair. I'm paying half of everything while she lives here completely free. You were demanding a legal tenant vacate without proper cause. That constitutes harassment under tenant protection laws. Harrison pushed an official-looking document toward me. It had a gold seal stamped at the top. You have 30 days to vacate these premises voluntarily. If you refuse, we will file for formal eviction through the courts. Eviction? I'm on the lease. I pay my rent on time every single month. My voice cracked with emotion. Which is precisely why we're offering the voluntary option first, Harrison said without any emotion whatsoever. An eviction on your record will make it nearly impossible to rent anywhere else. I looked directly at Brock. This is my home. Brock's voice was ice cold. I'm the primary leaseholder. My name is first on the lease. I have full authority. We agreed. I felt tears starting. You said we'd figure it out together. Brock shrugged. I said I'd handle it. I am. I had 30 days to leave my own apartment. I can't afford a lawyer. How is this happening? I barely sleep that night. I sit on my bed with my laptop open, typing roommate eviction laws and primary leaseholder rights into Google until my eyes burn. Every website I find talks about landlords evicting tenants or tenants suing landlords, but nothing addresses what happens when your roommate is trying to kick you out. I click through page after page of legal jargon that doesn't apply to my situation. My hands shake so badly I have trouble typing. The reality keeps hitting me in waves. I might actually be homeless in 30 days. I have nowhere to go. My savings account has maybe $800. First and last month's rent anywhere else would cost at least $3,000. I keep searching, getting more desperate with each useless result. Around 2 a.m., I find a tenant rights forum buried in the search results. Someone posted about a roommate dispute 3 years ago. I scroll through the responses and one comment makes me stop breathing. A user named Tenant Advocate 2019 wrote that most lease modifications require all parties' signatures, not just the primary leaseholder. I screenshot the comment immediately. My heart pounds as I read it again and again. Maybe Brock doesn't have the unilateral power he claims. Maybe Harrison was lying about everything. I screenshot the entire forum thread and save it in 3 different places on my phone and laptop. It's the first spark of hope I've felt since Harrison dropped those papers on the table. I spend another hour searching for information about dual signature lease requirements, but I can't find anything definitive for my state. I finally pass out around 4 a.m. with my laptop still open. My alarm goes off 3 hours later for work. I feel like I've been hit by a truck. My head throbs and my eyes feel like sandpaper. I call out sick because I genuinely can't function. My supervisor sounds annoyed but approves it. I spend the entire morning calling every free legal aid clinic in the city. The first one has a wait list of 6 weeks. The second one says my income is slightly too high to qualify for their services. The third one doesn't handle landlord-tenant disputes. The fourth one is only taking domestic violence cases right now. I call 17 different places by noon. Most of them have similar responses. Booked solid for weeks. Income requirements I barely exceed by a few $100s. Wrong type of case. One paralegal at a clinic actually stays on the phone with me for a few extra minutes. She sounds genuinely sympathetic as she tells me off the record that tenant-on-tenant evictions are really complicated and I really need a real attorney, not just legal aid. She gives me 3 names of attorneys who handle housing disputes. I call all 3 immediately. The first one doesn't return my voicemail. The second one's assistant says they're not taking new clients. The third one is Craig Monahan. His assistant schedules me for a consultation the next afternoon. The consultation fee alone is $200. I check my bank account 3 times before confirming the appointment. I can barely afford this, but I can't afford not to try. I spend the rest of the day gathering every document I can find. My copy of the lease, every utility bill from the past 6 months, bank statements showing my rent payments, the papers Harrison gave me, screenshots of my text conversations with Brock. I put everything in a folder and can't stop checking to make sure it's all there. The next day, I take a long lunch break and drive to Craig's office downtown. It's in a nice building that makes me feel even more out of place. The waiting room has expensive-looking furniture and legal books lining the walls. Craig is probably in his 50s with gray hair and reading glasses. He shakes my hand and gestures for me to sit down. I hand him the folder, and he spreads everything across his desk. He reads through my lease first, then the utility bills, then Harrison's eviction notice. I sit there sweating through my shirt while he reviews everything. My entire future hangs on whatever he's about to tell me. After what feels like an hour but is probably 10 minutes, Craig's face changes. He looks up at me with something like relief in his eyes. He taps the lease with his finger and says, "My roommate can't evict me unilaterally because this lease requires both primary and secondary tenant signatures for any modifications or terminations, and Brock would need my agreement or a court order based on legitimate cause." I almost cry right there in his office. The relief is so intense I feel dizzy. But then Craig keeps talking and explains the bad news. Even though I have a strong case, I need to file a formal response to prevent Brock from pursuing eviction through the courts. His retainer is $5,000 up front. I feel my face fall before I can stop it. $5,000 might as well be $50,000 given my current financial situation. Craig sees my reaction, and his voice gets gentler. He suggests I could try filing the paperwork myself, but he warns that one mistake could cost me everything. Courts are very particular about formatting and deadlines and legal language. I leave his office with a stack of forms and instructions. I feel simultaneously hopeful and terrified. I have legal standing to fight this, but I'm going up against Brock, who apparently has unlimited access to legal help through Harrison. I spend my entire lunch break the next day sitting in my car in the work parking lot filling out court forms. The legal terminology might as well be another language. Words like affirmative defense and motion to dismiss and verified complaint swim in front of my eyes. I Google half the terms just to understand what I'm supposed to write. 3 days after the attorney ambush, I come home from work around 6. I try to connect to the Wi-Fi to continue researching my case, and the password doesn't work. I try it 3 more times thinking I typed it wrong. Then I realize what happened. I find Brock in the kitchen and ask him about the WIFI. He barely looks up from his phone and shrugs. He says I'm not a permanent resident anymore, so I'm not entitled to household amenities. The cruelty is so casual it takes my breath away. I need internet to file my legal paperwork and research my case. This is deliberate sabotage. I grab my laptop and documents and drive to the public library. It's open until 8. The librarian at the desk sees me looking lost and asks if I need help. I explain I need to file court documents online. She's incredibly kind and patient. She helps me scan all my documents and shows me how to use the court's online portal. The website is confusing, but she walks me through each step. As I hit the submit button, I feel like I've at least done something instead of just waiting to be thrown out. My phone buzzes a few minutes later with an email from the court clerk. A hearing date will be set within 30 days. The next morning at work, my supervisor Melody calls me into her office. There's someone from HR sitting there already. My stomach drops before anyone even speaks. Melody's face is completely neutral as she tells me a complaint has been filed against me for stalking and harassing a former tenant of my apartment building. She says there's evidence of threatening messages and unwanted contact. I'm being terminated effective immediately for violating company conduct policies. I try to explain that I don't know what they're talking about, that there must be some mistake, but Melody holds up her hand to stop me. She slides a folder across the desk, and I see printed screenshots of text messages. My phone number is at the top of each one. The messages say things like, "You'll pay for this," and "I'm not letting this go," and "You think you can just take what's mine?" My hands start shaking as I read them because I never sent any of these. The HR person asks if I recognize my phone number and I say yes, but I didn't send these messages. Someone faked them somehow. Melody's face shows she doesn't believe me. She says the company takes harassment seriously and they can't risk keeping an employee who stalks and threatens people. I'm trying to think straight, but my brain feels fuzzy. I ask who even filed this complaint, and Melody says she can't share that information due to privacy concerns. The HR person starts talking about final paycheck and returning my building access card. Everything is moving too fast. Security shows up at the door within 5 minutes. A guard I've seen around for 2 years walks me back to my desk while people stare. I grab my coffee mug, a framed photo, some pens. Everything fits in one small cardboard box. My coworker Jake watches from across the room but doesn't say anything. The walk through the office feels like it takes forever. Everyone knows what's happening when security escorts someone out. I can feel their eyes following me to the elevator. The parking lot is nearly empty since it's only mid-morning. I sit in my car holding the box on my lap. My hands won't stop shaking. I stare at the office building for maybe 20 minutes just trying to process what happened. Then it clicks. Sienna. This has to be Sienna's work. She must have doctored those screenshots somehow, made it look like the messages came from my number. She reported me to my company as the stalking victim. They're not just trying to evict me anymore. They're destroying my entire life, my income, my job history, my professional reputation. I start the car, but I don't know where to go. I can't go back to the apartment. I drive to a coffee shop and sit in the parking lot trying to figure out my next move. I need Craig's retainer money more than ever now, but I just lost my income. My savings account has maybe $800. My credit card is already carrying a balance. That evening, I'm sitting in my car outside a different coffee shop because I can't face going home yet. I pull out my phone and call my parents. My dad, Ashton, answers on the 3rd ring. I try to explain everything. The eviction threat, the fake attorney Harrison, now losing my job over completely made-up stalking accusations. My voice keeps cracking as I talk. I tell him about the fabricated text messages and how Sienna must have created them to get me fired. I'm expecting my dad to be shocked or concerned or at least sympathetic. I'm barely holding it together while I explain the whole nightmare. There's a long pause after I finish talking. Then my dad sighs really heavy and says something that makes my stomach drop. He tells me they've been talking to Brock. I feel cold all over. My dad explains that Brock called them a few days ago. Brock presented himself as the reasonable one trying to handle a difficult roommate situation. He told my parents I've been harassing Sienna, refusing to accept that she lives at the apartment now, making everyone uncomfortable with my aggressive behavior. My dad says Brock seemed very concerned about the whole situation. I try to interrupt, but my dad keeps talking. He says Brock explained how he tried to work things out with me, but I kept escalating and making threats. My mom, Delphine, gets on the phone. Her voice has this disappointed tone that cuts right through me. She says they raised me better than to make a woman feel unsafe in her own home. She tells me I need to accept that living situations change and people move in together. I try to explain that Sienna doesn't pay any rent, that the whole eviction thing is a setup, that Harrison isn't even a real attorney. My mom cuts me off before I can finish. She says Brock showed them the messages I sent threatening him and Sienna. She tells me they're not going to support this kind of behavior. I realize with horror that Brock sent my parents the same fake screenshots that Sienna used to get me fired. My own family thinks I'm the bad guy here. They believe I'm some kind of unstable person harassing this poor couple. My dad gets back on the phone and tells me they won't be providing any financial help until I get my priorities straight and apologize to those kids. Those kids. He's calling Brock and Sienna kids like they're innocent victims. My mom says in the background that she's praying I'll come to my senses. The call ends, and I'm sitting alone in my car outside this coffee shop. My job is gone. My apartment is being stolen. Now my own parents have turned against me. Every support system I had is gone. I drive to the public library because I need internet, and I can't go back to the apartment where Brock changed the Wi-Fi password. I sit at a computer terminal feeling completely numb. The next week becomes pure survival mode. I file for unemployment online, but the website says it takes weeks to process claims. The form asks why I left my last job, and I have to check the box for terminated. That probably means I'll get denied anyway since it wasn't a layoff. I go to the grocery store and buy the cheapest food I can find. Ramen noodles, peanut butter, bread. I use my credit card because my checking account is almost empty. The card is already carrying a $1,500 balance, but I don't have a choice. I need to eat. Back at the apartment, Brock and Sienna act like I'm invisible. They sit on the couch watching TV and don't even look at me when I walk through. I start going through my stuff to see what I can sell. My gaming console that I saved up for last year. My bike that I barely ride anymore. Some old textbooks. I list everything on Facebook Marketplace. A guy offers me $200 for the console and I take it even though I paid $400. I need cash right now. My former coworker Hank Gentry messages me on Facebook. He left the company last year to work somewhere else. He saw my posts selling stuff and asks if everything is okay. I break down and tell him the whole story over Messenger. The eviction threat, losing my job, my parents cutting me off, all of it. Hank doesn't question whether I'm telling the truth. He just asks what I need. He tells me about a temp agency he works with that places people in short-term jobs. They pay daily and don't ask many questions about recent employment gaps. He sends me the contact information and tells me to use his name as a reference. I call them the next morning and they have me come in that afternoon. The coordinator asks some basic questions and has me fill out paperwork. She says they can start placing me in assignments right away. I start working whatever temp jobs they send me to. One day I'm in a warehouse loading boxes onto trucks. The next day I'm stocking shelves at a retail store overnight. Another day I'm doing data entry in some office building. The work is exhausting and the pay is barely above minimum wage. I'm making maybe $12 an hour when I used to make $22 at my real job. But it's cash flow when I have nothing else coming in. I work 12-hour shifts when they're available. My body aches constantly. I come home to the apartment and Brock and Sienna are having loud conversations in the living room about when the place will finally be peaceful. They're talking loud enough for me to hear through my bedroom door. Sienna laughs about how nice it'll be to have the second bedroom as an office. They're already planning how to use my room once I'm gone. 2 weeks after losing my job, I come home from a warehouse shift. There's a man standing outside the apartment door. He asks if I'm me, and I say yes. He hands me an envelope and says I've been served. Then he walks away. I open the envelope right there in the hallway. It's a restraining order petition from Brock. The paperwork says I threatened violence against him and Sienna. It lists the fake text messages as evidence. Then it adds new stuff I've never even done. It claims I've been behaving erratically and making verbal threats in the apartment. It says Brock fears for his and Sienna's safety. There's a court hearing scheduled in 1 week. A judge will decide whether to grant a temporary restraining order. I read through the papers 3 times trying to understand. If Brock gets this restraining order, I'll be legally banned from my own apartment. I won't be able to go home. I won't be able to fight the eviction because I'll be barred from the premises. This is his plan. Create a legal crisis that forces me out before the eviction hearing where I might actually have a chance. I'm standing in the hallway holding these papers, and I can hear Brock and Sienna talking and laughing inside the apartment. My credit card debt is past $8,000 now. I'm working temp jobs that barely cover food. I have no family support and no real attorney. In 1 week, a judge might ban me from my own home. I stand there reading through the restraining order papers one more time, and something clicks in my brain about the timing. The eviction hearing is scheduled for 3 weeks from now. If Brock gets this restraining order approved next week, I won't be allowed within 500 feet of the apartment. I won't be able to gather my documents, meet with any lawyer, or even show up to contest the eviction. He's not just trying to scare me. He's trying to lock me out before I can fight back in court. I fold the papers and shove them in my pocket. My credit card statement shows $8,247 in debt now. The temp agency paid me $96 yesterday for an 8-hour warehouse shift. The math doesn't work anymore. I walk down to my car because I can't go back inside that apartment right now. I sit in the driver's seat and pull up Craig's office number on my phone. His secretary answers and I ask if I can come in tomorrow morning. She checks the schedule and says Craig has 15 minutes at 9 a.m. I take it. The next morning, I'm waiting outside Craig's office at 8:45. My hands won't stop shaking. When he calls me back, I sit across from his desk and lay out everything that's happened since our last meeting. I lost my job because of fake screenshots. My parents cut me off because they believe Brock's lies. Now there's a restraining order hearing in 6 days. Craig listens without interrupting. When I finish, I lean forward in my chair. I tell him I'll pay in installments, whatever amount per month he needs. I'll sign over part of my wages once I get stable work again. I'll do payment plans, anything. Craig closes the folder in front of him and shakes his head slowly. He explains that his malpractice insurance won't allow him to take cases without the full retainer up front. It's firm policy, not his personal choice. But then he leans back and gives me advice for free. He says to show up at the restraining order hearing with any evidence I can find that proves those text messages are fake. Phone records, anything that contradicts their timeline. He says judges take restraining orders seriously, but they also don't like being manipulated with false evidence. I thank him and leave. At least I have something to work with now. I spend the rest of that day calling my phone carrier. The first customer service person transfers me to technical support. Technical support transfers me to the legal department. The legal department tells me I need to submit a written request. I submit the written request through their website. 2 days later, I get an email saying they can provide a call and text log showing the numbers I contacted and the dates and times. But the actual message content requires a subpoena from a court or law enforcement. I call back and explain I need to prove I didn't send certain messages. The representative sounds sympathetic, but says there's nothing they can do without a subpoena. I ask how to get a subpoena. She says I need a lawyer to request one from a judge. I don't have a lawyer. I spend another whole day on the phone trying different approaches. I talk to 5 different representatives. I get transferred to supervisors twice. Everyone tells me the same thing. Message content needs a subpoena. I can get the basic log showing I sent texts to Brock's number on certain dates, but I can't prove what those texts actually said. The screenshots Brock has could show anything. My basic phone log won't definitively prove they're fake. I print out the log anyway because it's all I have. 3 days before the hearing, I'm working an overnight stocking shift at a grocery store. I get off at 6 a.m. and drive back to the apartment. I sit in my car in the parking lot because I can't deal with going inside yet. I pull out all the documents I've been carrying around. The eviction notice, the restraining order petition, the utility bills I originally gathered to show Brock the cost increases, my phone records. Everything is spread across my passenger seat and dashboard. I pick up one of the utility bills and stare at it. Something looks off, but I can't figure out what. Then I see it. The bill is addressed to Sienna, but the address isn't our apartment. It's a completely different street across town on the south side. I grab my phone and Google the address. It's a real place, an apartment complex called Riverside Gardens. I look through more papers scattered around my car. There's a credit card statement that must have gotten mixed in with my stuff somehow. It's also addressed to Sienna at that same south side address. My hands start shaking as I pull up the county property records website on my phone. I type in Sienna's full name. The results show her registered residence for tax purposes at the Riverside Gardens address. Not our apartment. The address where she's supposedly been living for 3 months and established legal tenancy. I sit there staring at my phone screen as everything starts making sense. I open a new browser tab and start searching tenant law websites again. Every single legal site says the same thing. Tenancy isn't just about staying somewhere for 60 days. It's about establishing that place as your primary residence, your main home where you live and receive mail and pay bills. If someone maintains and pays rent at a different apartment the whole time, they never actually established tenancy at the second place. They're just a guest. Harrison's whole legal argument about Sienna being a legal tenant was based on a lie. She never lived at our apartment as her primary residence. She was staying over while keeping her real apartment across town. I spend the entire rest of that day and night researching everything I can find about primary residence requirements. I'm still sitting in my car at noon reading legal websites on my phone. I drive to the library and use their computers to print out relevant state statutes about tenant rights and primary residence definitions. By 3 a.m., I have a folder full of documentation, and I finally understand what happened. Harrison wasn't just wrong about the law. He deliberately lied, knowing Sienna maintained another residence. The hearing is at 9 a.m. I haven't slept, but I feel more focused than I have in weeks. I put on the one decent shirt I own that isn't wrinkled. I drive to the courthouse and go through security. The courtroom is small with maybe 20 seats. Brock is already there with a different man in a suit. Not Harrison this time. A real attorney. I sit on the opposite side of the room. When the judge calls our case, we both stand. Brock's attorney presents the fabricated text messages first. He shows the judge printed screenshots of me supposedly threatening Brock and Sienna. Then Brock takes the stand and testifies about my threatening behavior and how scared he and Sienna are. He's good at looking sincere. The judge listens and takes notes. When it's my turn, I walk up with my folder. My voice shakes at first, but I force myself to speak clearly. I present the utility bill addressed to Sienna at the different address, then the credit card statement, then the property records showing that address as her registered residence. The judge actually looks up from his notes with interest. He asks Brock's attorney to explain why Sienna has active accounts at a different address if she's been living at our apartment. The attorney wasn't expecting this. He shuffles through his papers and starts talking about how Sienna was transitioning between residences during that time period. I interrupt and point out that the dates on the utility bill show she was paying electricity and gas at the other address during the exact same months. Harrison claimed she established tenancy at our place. You can't establish tenancy somewhere while actively maintaining and paying for a completely different residence as your primary home. The judge looks at Brock's attorney and asks if he has documentation proving Sienna actually lived at our apartment as her primary residence during those 3 months. The attorney admits he doesn't have that documentation with him today. The judge doesn't dismiss the restraining order petition, but he doesn't grant it either. He says he's continuing the hearing for 2 weeks and ordering both parties to provide additional documentation about Sienna's actual residence during the relevant time period. He wants utility records, lease agreements, mail receipts, anything proving where she actually lived. I walk out of that courthouse feeling hope for the first time in weeks. I drive straight to the address on Sienna's utility bill. Riverside Gardens is a decent apartment complex with a pool and parking garage. I walk around until I find the building number from her mail. There's a mailbox directory in the lobby. Sienna's name is clearly printed next to apartment 2847. I take photos of everything with my phone. The building exterior, the mailbox directory, the apartment number on the door. Then I wait outside near the parking garage. Around 6 p.m., a woman in her 50s comes out walking a dog. I approach her carefully and ask if she lives in the building. She says she's been here 5 years. I show her a photo of Sienna on my phone and ask if she knows her. The woman nods immediately and says, "That's the girl in 2847 who works from home." She's seen her coming and going for months. I ask if she knows anything else. The woman mentions that Sienna complained a few weeks ago about her boyfriend's annoying roommate who wouldn't leave them alone. My stomach twists, but I thank her and take down her apartment number in case I need a witness statement later. I spend the next 2 days going back to that complex at different times. I see Sienna's car in the parking garage twice. I photograph it with the apartment building visible in the background showing the date and timestamp. I talk to 2 more neighbors who confirm she lives there. One mentions seeing her almost every evening. On the 4th day, I go to the utility company offices in person. I fill out formal request forms for records showing Sienna's account activity at the Riverside Gardens address. It costs $50 for expedited processing that I can barely afford, but I pay it with my credit card. Within a week, I receive thick envelopes from the electric company, gas company, and internet provider. Every single one shows Sienna maintained active accounts at Riverside Gardens throughout the entire 3-month period. Brock claimed she was establishing tenancy at our apartment. The bills show regular usage patterns. Someone was definitely living there and using utilities the whole time. She was paying for electricity, gas, and internet at her real apartment while supposedly living at ours. I gather every single piece of evidence I've collected over the past week and drive straight to Craig Monahan's office. My hands shake as I carry the folder stuffed with utility bills, neighbor statements, photographs, and mail receipts. The secretary recognizes me and waves me back without making me wait. Craig looks up from his desk as I walk in, probably expecting bad news based on my expression. I drop the folder on his desk and just say I found something big. He opens it and starts going through the documents one by one. His whole attitude changes as he reads. He looks at the utility bills showing Sienna's active accounts at Riverside Gardens during the exact months Harrison claimed she lived at our apartment. He studies the photographs of her name on the mailbox. He reads through the neighbor statements confirming she lives there and works from home at that address. Craig leans back in his chair and lets out a low whistle. He tells me this isn't just a failed attempt to kick me out anymore. This is fraud. Harrison stood in my kitchen presenting himself as a lawyer when he had no license to practice law. He made false claims about Sienna's tenant status. He used made-up evidence to threaten me with illegal removal from my home. Craig says this could be criminal. I feel my chest get tight with something that might actually be hope for the first time in weeks. Craig keeps flipping through the documents and shaking his head. He points out that Harrison gave me a business card claiming to be an attorney. He presented legal documents with official-looking seals. He made specific claims about tenant law that were completely wrong. Craig explains that pretending to be a lawyer is a serious crime in our state. Add in the fraud aspect, the false evidence, the threats to illegally remove me from my home, and we're looking at potential criminal charges. He asks if I still have Harrison's business card. I pull it out of my wallet where I've been keeping it like some kind of terrible reminder. Craig makes a copy of it right there in his office. Craig sits forward and his voice gets really serious. He says he'll take my case on a payment deal where he gets paid from whatever we win. We're not just fighting the removal attempt anymore. We're going after Brock, Sienna, and Harrison for planning fraud together, trying to illegally kick me out and Harrison's fake lawyer act. Craig explains I have grounds for a lawsuit against all three of them. But first, we need to report Harrison to the state bar group that licenses attorneys. Craig says they take fake lawyers very seriously. He also thinks we should talk to the police because this might be more than just a civil case. This could involve criminal charges. I ask what happens next and Craig starts making a list. Emergency motion to throw out the removal case based on the fraud. Formal complaint to the state bar about Harrison with copies of everything. Police report about the threats and fake legal advice. Then we file our own lawsuit going after all three of them for damages. He estimates we're looking at tens of thousands in potential damages between my lost wages, emotional harm, legal costs, and punishment damages for how bad their behavior was. I can barely process what he's saying. An hour ago, I was drowning in debt and facing homelessness. Now I have a real lawyer who believes me and wants to fight back. Craig starts working immediately. He pulls up legal forms on his computer and begins filling them out while asking me questions. He needs exact dates for everything. When did Harrison present himself as Brock's lawyer? What specific claims did he make about tenant law? What documents did he show me? What threats did he make? I answer everything as clearly as I can remember. Craig types fast and keeps muttering about how obvious the fraud is. He prints out the emergency motion to dismiss the removal proceedings, and it's thick, maybe 15 pages. He's attached copies of all my evidence about Sienna's real apartment, the utility bills showing she paid for electricity and internet somewhere else, the neighbor statements, the photographs, everything that proves she never actually lived with us as her main home. Craig also prepares the formal complaint to the state bar about Harrison. He includes the business card Harrison gave me, copies of the documents Harrison presented while claiming to be a lawyer, my statement about what happened during that awful kitchen table meeting. Craig explains that the bar investigates people practicing law without a license. If they find Harrison guilty, he could face criminal charges. Craig files everything electronically right from his office. I watch him hit submit on the emergency motion, then submit on the bar complaint. Each click feels like I'm finally fighting back instead of just taking hits. Craig prints copies of everything for my records. He tells me to keep these somewhere safe, maybe make digital backups too. This is our evidence and we can't lose it. 3 days after Craig files the bar complaint, I get a call from an unknown number. A woman introduces herself as an investigator with the state bar. She says they received my complaint about Harrison and they want to talk to me. Apparently Harrison has been on their radar before for practicing law without a license. This isn't his first time doing this. My complaint, combined with the detailed evidence Craig provided, triggered an immediate investigation. The investigator asks if I can come to her office to give a statement. I take time off from my temp job and go meet her downtown. Her office is small and plain with filing cabinets everywhere. She has me sit down and starts asking very specific questions. Did Harrison explicitly say he was Brock's attorney? Did he present documents that looked official? Did he make specific claims about the law? Did he threaten me with legal action? I answer yes to everything and explain exactly what happened. She takes notes the whole time and records our conversation with my permission. The investigator tells me that pretending to be an attorney is a criminal crime, not just a rule break. She's gathering evidence to refer the case to the district attorney's office for possible criminal charges. She explains that what Harrison did, using fake legal power to threaten and scare someone about their housing, is taken very seriously. Housing is a protected area under state law. You can't use fraud and fake legal threats to force someone out of their home. She thanks me for coming forward and says the investigation will continue. She also mentions that if criminal charges get filed, I might need to testify. I say I'm absolutely willing to do that. 2 days after meeting with the bar investigator, my phone rings while I'm stocking shelves at a warehouse job. It's Brock. I almost don't answer, but something makes me pick up. His voice sounds completely different from the cold, mean tone he used during the lawyer setup. He's practically begging. He starts talking fast about how Harrison got the legal situation wrong and how Brock didn't know Sienna hadn't actually made our place her main home. He says Harrison told him that staying somewhere for 60 days automatically made you a legal tenant, and Brock just believed him. He keeps saying he wants to work something out and avoid this getting out of hand. His voice actually shakes when he talks. I don't say much, just let him keep talking. Brock says maybe we can figure out a deal where I stay, and Sienna stays at her place more often. He suggests maybe splitting utilities 3 ways like I originally asked. He sounds desperate in a way I've never heard before. He mentions that he heard about the bar complaint and the investigation. He says Harrison is his girlfriend's cousin, and Harrison promised he knew what he was doing. Brock tries to make it sound like he's a victim too, like Harrison tricked everyone. But I remember sitting at that kitchen table with Brock's ice-cold face while Harrison threatened me. Brock knew exactly what was happening. While Brock keeps talking and making excuses, I remember something Craig mentioned during our meeting. My state allows one-party permission for recording calls. That means I can record a phone conversation without telling the other person. I quickly open the voice recorder app on my phone and hit record. Brock is still rambling about how this whole thing got out of control and how he never meant for it to go this far. I start asking specific questions. I ask if Harrison is actually a licensed lawyer. Brock hesitates and then admits no. Harrison isn't actually licensed, but he knows a lot about tenant law from helping his friends before. I ask if Sienna kept her apartment at Riverside Gardens the whole time. Another pause. Brock says yes, she kept that place because her lease wasn't up yet, but she was planning to move in with us eventually. I ask if the removal threat was based on Harrison's understanding of the law. Brock says yes. Harrison told them that staying somewhere for 60 days creates tenant rights, and they could make me leave since he's the main person on the lease. Every answer Brock gives makes things worse for him. He's admitting that Harrison isn't a real lawyer. He's confirming Sienna kept her other apartment. He's acknowledging that the whole removal threat was based on Harrison's fake legal advice. He tries to claim he didn't know the law stuff was wrong, but he just admitted he knew Harrison wasn't licensed and knew Sienna lived somewhere else. His whole defense about being tricked falls apart with his own words. I keep asking calm questions and letting him talk. By the time the call ends, I have a 20-minute recording of Brock admitting every key fact that destroys his case. The next morning, I meet Craig at his office and play him the recording. He listens to the whole thing with his eyes getting wider. When it ends, he actually laughs and says Brock just handed us the entire case on a recording. Craig makes a copy of the audio file and adds it to our evidence folder. Then he tells me we have a meeting scheduled with a detective from the fraud division. The bar investigator referred my case to the police, and they assigned someone to look into it. We drive to the police station together. The detective is a middle-aged guy with gray hair who looks tired but interested when we sit down. Craig does most of the talking at first, explaining the whole situation from the beginning. The fake lawyer setup, the threats to kick me out, the made-up evidence, the discovery that Sienna never actually lived with us. Then I play the recording of Brock's call. The detective listens carefully and takes notes. When it's done, he asks to keep a copy of the recording. Craig hands over a USB drive with the audio file plus all our other evidence, the utility bills from Sienna's real apartment, Harrison's business card, the documents Harrison gave me, the neighbor statements, everything. The detective explains that this type of fraud, using fake legal power to threaten and force someone about housing, is taken seriously by his department. Housing is a protected area under state law. You can't use lies and fake legal threats to make someone leave their home. He says he'll review everything and present it to the prosecutor's office. He can't promise what charges might get filed, but based on what he's seen, there's definitely enough for a criminal investigation. He asks if I'm willing to cooperate fully if this goes forward. I tell him absolutely yes. I want them held responsible for what they tried to do to me. The continued restraining order hearing happens the next week. I walk into the courthouse with Craig, and I feel completely different from the first time. Last time I was alone and scared with barely any evidence. This time I have a real lawyer, a folder full of proof and a recording that destroys Brock's whole story. Brock shows up with a different lawyer this time, not Harrison, obviously. His new lawyer is a woman in an expensive suit who looks unhappy to be there. The judge calls the case, and Brock's lawyer immediately stands up and asks to withdraw the request for a restraining order. But the judge doesn't let her. He says he wants answers about what's been going on with this case. He mentions that the court received notice about a bar investigation and a criminal investigation related to the original removal proceedings. He wants to know what's happening before he dismisses anything. Craig stands up and asks permission to present evidence. The judge nods. Craig walks through everything. He shows the utility bills proving Sienna lived at Riverside Gardens the whole time. He plays parts of the recording where Brock admits Harrison isn't a licensed lawyer and admits Sienna kept her other apartment. He presents the neighbor statements confirming Sienna's real address. He explains how Harrison presented himself as an attorney and made false legal claims to threaten me with illegal removal. The judge's face gets harder as Craig talks. Brock's lawyer tries to interrupt a few times, but the judge tells her to wait. When Craig finishes, the judge asks Brock's lawyer if she has anything to say. She starts talking about how her client was misled by bad legal advice, but the judge cuts her off. He says the recording makes it clear Brock knew Harrison wasn't licensed and knew Sienna lived elsewhere. The judge denies the restraining order request completely. Then he makes comments about wasting the court's time with fake claims and says he's referring the matter to the prosecutor's office as well. Brock looks pale as we leave the courtroom. His lawyer won't even look at him. Craig files our lawsuit the very next day. I sit in his office while he finalizes the paperwork. We're suing Brock, Sienna, and Harrison together for everything they did. The lawsuit lists it all out. Pain and suffering from the emotional harm they caused. Lost wages from my job firing based on their made-up text messages. The costs I paid fighting their fake removal attempt. Punishment damages for planning fraud together. The lawsuit is 30 pages long and it tells the whole story in detail. How Sienna moved in without paying anything. How I tried to handle it reasonably. How they responded by setting up the fake lawyer meeting. How Harrison presented himself as an attorney when he had no license. How they made false claims about tenant law. How they created fake text messages that got me fired. How they destroyed my relationship with my parents by sending them the made-up screenshots. How they filed a fake restraining order to force me out before I could defend myself. Craig explains that we're asking for $50,000 in total damages, but we might get more or less depending on what the jury decides. The important thing is getting everything on the record in a legal filing. We're not hiding anymore. We're going after them in public court documents that anyone can read. Craig files the lawsuit electronically and serves copies to Brock, Sienna, and Harrison through a professional process server. Now they all officially know they're being sued. Within a week, I get served with papers at my apartment. A process server hands me a thick envelope and has me sign for it. Inside is a settlement offer from Brock's lawyer. I read through it with my hands shaking a little. They want to settle the whole thing before it goes to discovery and depositions. Discovery is where both sides have to hand over all their evidence and answer questions under oath. Depositions are where lawyers question people while they're sworn in. Brock clearly doesn't want any of that happening. The offer is for $15,000. In exchange, I have to agree to move out voluntarily within 60 days and sign a paper saying I won't talk about what happened. The money would be paid in one lump sum within 10 days of signing. I call Craig immediately and read him the offer over the phone. He's quiet for a minute and then says we should meet to discuss it. I drive to his office that same afternoon. Craig has the settlement offer printed out on his desk. He explains that $15,000 isn't bad money, especially for someone in my financial situation. But he thinks we can get a lot more if we push forward with the lawsuit. The evidence is strongly in our favor. We have the recording of Brock's admissions. We have proof Sienna never lived with us. We have documentation of Harrison's fake lawyer act. Plus, there's a criminal investigation happening at the same time, which puts even more pressure on them to settle. Craig's advice is that we can probably get double or triple that amount if we counteroffer and show we're serious about going to trial. He also points out that making me move out shouldn't be part of any settlement. I'm the one who's been wronged here. Why should I have to leave my home? The not talking condition is standard in settlements, but Craig thinks we can negotiate better terms there too. He suggests we reject this offer and send back our own demands. I trust Craig's judgment. He's been right about everything so far. I tell Craig I'm rejecting their offer. I'm not covering up what they did to me, and I'm definitely not moving out of my own apartment after everything they put me through. Craig nods and starts typing immediately on his laptop. He's drafting our counter-demand right there while I watch. $50,000 in damages. Brock and Sienna move out within 30 days, not me. Written admissions of the entire fraud scheme that I can show my parents and my former employer. And absolutely no non-disclosure agreement. We're not negotiating my silence. Craig prints out the counter-demand and has me review it before he sends it. The language is clear and direct. We're not asking, we're demanding. He emails it to Brock's attorney that same afternoon. I leave his office feeling like I finally have some power back in this situation. The next week brings news that changes everything. Craig calls me on a Wednesday morning sounding energized. The district attorney's office just filed criminal charges against Harrison for unauthorized practice of law and fraud. It's official now. Harrison is facing actual criminal prosecution for pretending to be an attorney and using that fake authority to threaten me. The charges include fraud, impersonation of a legal professional, and conspiracy to commit illegal eviction. Craig explains that this puts enormous pressure on Brock and Sienna because they're connected to Harrison's criminal case. The news spreads through the local legal community fast. Craig hears from other attorneys that Harrison's case is being talked about as a warning example. 2 days after the criminal charges are filed, I get a call from Hank. He saw something online and wanted to give me a heads up. Sienna's employer found out about the false HR complaint she filed against me. Someone at my former company must have talked to someone at her company. Corporate world connections. Her employer launched an internal investigation into whether Sienna had fabricated evidence and filed a false harassment complaint to damage someone's career. The investigation took less than a week. Sienna was terminated for serious misconduct and ethics violations. Hank sends me a screenshot of a post from someone who works at Sienna's company talking about the firing. The irony isn't lost on me. She got me fired with fake evidence, and now she's fired for making fake evidence. Everything they tried to do to me is coming back on them. Craig keeps me updated on the civil case preparation. We're scheduled for a court date in 6 weeks. He's preparing for depositions and discovery. Brock's attorney knows we have strong evidence and a criminal case backing up our fraud claims. The pressure is building on their side. 2 weeks before our court date, Craig calls me with news. Brock's attorney sent a revised settlement offer. I drive to Craig's office immediately to review it. The new offer is $45,000. They'll provide written admissions I can share with specific parties, including my parents and my former employer. Brock will move out of the apartment within 45 days. The only condition is that I don't speak to media about the case. No interviews, no social media posts about the details, no public statements. Craig sits back in his chair and looks at me seriously. He thinks I should take this offer. We've won everything that actually matters. The money is substantial. The written admissions give me what I need to clear my name with my family and my former employer. Brock moving out means I keep my home. The media restriction is standard and doesn't prevent me from telling people in my personal life what happened. If we go to trial, we might get more money, but we might get less. Trials are unpredictable. This offer gives me certainty and closure. I think about it for maybe 5 minutes. Then I tell Craig I'll accept it. He starts drafting the acceptance and settlement agreement that same afternoon. The settlement documents arrive a week later. I read through every single page with Craig. The written admissions are detailed and unambiguous. Harrison was not a licensed attorney and had no authority to make legal claims or threaten eviction. Sienna never established legal tenancy at my apartment because she maintained her primary residence elsewhere and never intended to make my apartment her permanent home. The text messages used to get me fired were fabricated and doctored to make me appear threatening. The entire eviction threat was based on fraudulent legal claims made by someone impersonating an attorney. Brock and Sienna knowingly participated in this scheme. Every single thing they did to me is admitted in writing and signed by their attorney. I take the documents to a notary public and get multiple copies notarized. I make 5 copies total and store them in different locations. 1 in my apartment, 1 in a safe deposit box at my bank, 1 with Craig, 1 digital scan in my email, and 1 physical copy I keep in my car. Nobody is ever taking these away from me. I write a long letter to my parents explaining everything that actually happened. I attach copies of the settlement documents and the written admissions. I mail it certified so I know they receive it. 2 days later, my phone rings. It's my dad. I can hear something different in his voice immediately. Guilt. He apologizes for not believing me. He says he's sorry for siding with Brock without hearing my full story. He explains that Brock was very convincing and seemed so reasonable. But seeing the legal documents and the admissions makes it clear that I was telling the truth the whole time. My mom gets on the phone and she's crying. She says she's sorry for abandoning me when I needed them most. She keeps saying she should have known better, should have trusted me, should have asked more questions. I don't tell them it's okay because it's not okay. What they did hurt me badly, but I tell them I appreciate the apology and I'm willing to work on rebuilding trust. The relationship isn't magically fixed. It's going to take time. But at least now they know the truth. The next week, I call my former employer and request a meeting with Melody and HR. They're hesitant at first, but I mention that my attorney Craig will be sending them some documents they need to see. That gets their attention. The meeting is scheduled for the following Tuesday. I show up with Craig and copies of the settlement documents. We sit in a conference room with Melody and 2 people from HR. Craig does most of the talking. He presents the written admission that the stalking complaint was completely fabricated. He shows them the settlement documents proving that Sienna created false evidence to damage my employment. Then Craig hands them a letter threatening legal action if they don't correct my termination record. My firing was based on fraudulent evidence. If they don't fix my personnel file, we'll sue for wrongful termination. The HR representatives look uncomfortable. Melody won't make eye contact with me. They ask for a week to review everything with their legal department. 5 days later, I get a call from HR. My personnel file has been amended. Instead of showing I was terminated for cause, it now shows I resigned voluntarily. They're providing a neutral reference letter that confirms my dates of employment and says I'm eligible for rehire. It doesn't admit they were wrong, but it removes the black mark from my record. I don't want my job back anyway. I've already found better work through the temp agency connections Hank set me up with, but I needed my record cleared for future opportunities. 3 months after the attorney ambush that nearly destroyed my life, I'm still living in my apartment. Brock moved out 2 weeks ago. The place feels like mine again. I used the settlement money to pay down my credit card debt significantly. I'm back to having savings. My family relationship is slowly healing through weekly phone calls. My employment record is cleared. I learned that some people will exploit any weakness they can find. But I also learned that fighting back against fraud is possible even when you feel completely powerless. The apartment feels peaceful now. I'm sleeping through the night without panic attacks about becoming homeless. I won. More importantly, I survived.